My name is Carlotta, 27 years old, and until last month I was living with my parents to save money after finishing physical therapy school. I always paid my fair share of rent, $600 monthly, which seemed reasonable. Then out of nowhere they doubled it to $1,200 to support my unemployed brother Jack. He has been the golden child his entire life, but this was the final straw. So I did something they never expected. I moved out without telling them. Where are you watching from today? If you have ever dealt with family favoritism, hit subscribe and join me as I share what happened when I finally stood up for myself. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Rochester, Minnesota with my parents and younger brother Jack. Our house was nice enough, a four-bedroom colonial with a big backyard where neighborhood kids would gather to play. My parents both worked steady jobs, dad as an insurance adjuster, and mom as a dental hygienist. We were comfortable, not wealthy, but never wanting for necessities. From early on, the difference in how my parents treated Jack and me was subtle but unmistakable. I was always the responsible one. In elementary school, I maintained straight A's, joined the science club, and even started volunteering at the local animal shelter by age 10. Meanwhile, Jack struggled academically frequently, forgetting homework and barely passing subjects that came easily to me. Instead of holding him accountable, my parents hired tutors and blamed his teachers. Jack just learns differently, my mother would say. The school system doesn't accommodate creative minds like his. When I was 13, I won first place in the regional spelling bee after studying for weeks. My parents attended, but left immediately after my victory to get Jack to his soccer practice. They missed the award ceremony entirely. That night, there was no celebration dinner for my achievement. But the following weekend, they threw a big party. When Jack scored a single goal in his game, "Your brother needs the encouragement," Dad explained when I questioned the discrepancy. "You know how sensitive he is about sports. You are naturally good at academic things, so you don't need the same recognition." By high school, the pattern was firmly established. I was captain of the debate team, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and worked weekends at the local grocery store to save for college. Jack was caught skipping school multiple times and had his first brush with the law when he and his friends were found drinking in the park. My parents grounded him for a week, but then decided the punishment was too harsh for a normal teenage mistake and let him attend a concert that weekend. The most painful memory came during my high school graduation. I was valedictorian and scheduled to give a speech. The night before, Jack got into a minor fender bender driving home past curfew. Nothing serious, just a scraped bumper. But my parents spent the entire morning of my graduation dealing with insurance and comforting him. They arrived at the ceremony just as I was leaving the stage, having missed my entire speech. "We are so sorry, sweetie," Mom said, hugging me afterward. Jack was really upset about the car, and we couldn't leave him alone in that state. Christmas and birthdays told the same story. One year, I received sensible clothes and school supplies, while Jack got the latest gaming system. For my 16th birthday, I got driving lessons and was told I would need to save for my own car. When Jack turned 16, my parents surprised him with a used but recent model Jeep. "He needs motivation to be more responsible," they reasoned. "You're already so independent." Through it all, my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, was often the only one who acknowledged the disparity. During family gatherings, I would catch her watching with a frown, as my parents fawned over Jack while barely noticing my existence. "You know you're extraordinary, right?" she would whisper to me during family holidays. "Don't ever measure your worth by their attention." My best friend Marissa also witnessed the favoritism firsthand. She grew up next door and spent countless hours at our house. "Your parents are so weird about Jack," she told me once as we did homework. "It's like they think he'll break if they expect anything from him." Despite the clear favoritism, I still loved my family and hoped that things would change as we grew older. I threw myself into academics believing that success would eventually earn their recognition. I graduated high school with a full academic scholarship to the state university for my undergraduate degree, but even that came with a caveat. "Such a practical choice," my father commented. "Smart to save money." Meanwhile, Jack barely graduated high school and enrolled in community college. He dropped out after one semester, but my parents called it taking time to find his passion. They fully funded his finding himself period, which mostly consisted of playing video games and working occasional part-time jobs that never lasted more than a few months. I worked multiple campus jobs throughout college to cover my living expenses while maintaining my scholarship with my grades. Every summer, I took additional jobs to save money for the next year. When I was accepted into a competitive physical therapy graduate program, my parents congratulated me but immediately expressed concern about the cost. "Are you sure you want to take on that debt?" Mom asked. "Maybe you should consider something less expensive." That same year, they gave Jack money to start a podcast about gaming that lasted exactly 3 episodes before he lost interest. After completing my doctoral program in physical therapy, I faced the harsh reality of significant student loan debt, despite my scholarships and part-time jobs throughout school. The practical solution was temporarily moving back home while establishing my career. My parents agreed to let me rent my old bedroom for $600 monthly, which seemed reasonable for our area. "We don't want to charge you nothing," Mom explained. "You need to learn financial responsibility." I found a position at Lakeside Rehabilitation Center, a well-respected facility about 20 minutes from my parents' house. The starting salary was solid, especially for a new graduate, but between student loan payments, car payments, and rent to my parents, I was barely breaking even each month. Still, I created a strict budget and financial plan, calculating exactly how long it would take to build an emergency fund and eventually save enough for a down payment on my own place. My daily routine was exhausting but purposeful. I woke at 5:30 each morning, arrived at work by 7, and typically didn't leave until 6 in the evening. Many days I would grab dinner on the way home, eat quickly, and fall into bed only to repeat the cycle the next day. Despite the grueling schedule, I found tremendous satisfaction in my work. My boss Amanda, the rehabilitation director, quickly became a mentor and friend. She recognized my dedication and frequently assigned me challenging cases that helped me grow professionally. "You have exceptional instincts, Carlotta," she told me after I successfully helped an elderly stroke patient regain mobility beyond expectations. "I see a bright future for you in this field." I formed close friendships with several coworkers, particularly Diane, a speech therapist, and Marcus, another physical therapist who had been at the center for 5 years. They became my support system, the people I could vent to when family stress became overwhelming. Meanwhile, Jack continued his pattern of instability. He cycled through jobs at alarming rates. 3 months at an electronics store ended when he repeatedly showed up late. 2 months as a delivery driver concluded when he totaled the company car. 6 weeks as a bartender finished when the owner caught him giving free drinks to friends. After each failure, my parents responded with the same pattern. Initial disappointment followed by a flood of excuses and support. The manager had it out for him. The schedule was unreasonable. He just hasn't found the right fit yet. While I paid rent faithfully and handled all my own expenses, I watched as my parents continuously bailed Jack out financially. When his car needed repairs, they covered it. When he couldn't make rent for the apartment, he briefly shared with friends. They paid that too. When he wanted the newest iPhone despite being unemployed, it appeared in his hands within days. Family dinners, which occurred every Sunday without exception, became showcases of this disparity. My parents would politely ask about my work before turning their full attention to Jack's latest interests or struggles. "Carlotta, how is the rehabilitation center?" Mom would ask. "Great, I just got assigned to a complex spinal injury case that's really challenging and interesting." "That's nice, dear. Jack, tell us more about that band you discovered." They would then spend the next hour discussing Jack's musical taste or his ideas for businesses he would never start. I became background noise in these conversations, occasionally nodding or commenting, but largely invisible. One particularly frustrating incident occurred when my car needed significant transmission work. The repair would cost $1,700, nearly wiping out my small emergency fund. When I mentioned this concern at dinner, my father nodded sympathetically. "That's tough, but these are the kinds of financial challenges adults face. You make good money, so you'll rebuild your savings." The very next week, Jack announced he wanted to trade in his car for a newer model because he was tired of the old one. My parents immediately offered to help with the down payment. "We know how important reliable transportation is," Mom said, not registering the hypocrisy. I brought this up to Aunt Susan during one of our coffee dates. "Do they even hear themselves?" I asked her, fighting back tears of frustration. Aunt Susan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your parents have convinced themselves that this unequal treatment is somehow fair. Jack needs more help so he gets more resources. You're capable so you get less support. It's backward logic, but they don't see it. As months passed, I watched my bank account grow painfully slowly, while my resentment grew much faster. Still, I kept the peace, telling myself it was temporary, just a stepping stone to independence. I calculated that within 18 months, I could afford to move out comfortably. What I didn't expect was that even this carefully constructed plan would be destroyed by my parents' ongoing favoritism toward Jack. It happened on a typical Sunday family dinner in March. Mom had prepared her signature roast chicken with all the sides. The mood seemed normal as we gathered around the dining table. Dad poured wine for everyone except Jack, who preferred beer. Small talk about the unseasonably warm weather filled the first few minutes as we settled into our usual seats. I had just finished sharing a brief anecdote about a patient's remarkable progress when Dad cleared his throat in that particular way that signaled he had something important to say. Mom immediately stopped eating and gave him a small nod. The synchronized move made my stomach tighten instinctively. Carlotta, your mother and I need to discuss something with you. Dad began, his tone deliberately casual, though his posture was anything but. We've been looking at our household expenses lately, and we need to make some adjustments. I nodded slowly, fork suspended midair. Okay. We need to increase your rent. He continued, looking just past my shoulder, rather than directly at me. Starting next month, it will be $1,200 instead of $600. The chicken in my mouth suddenly tasted like sawdust. I forced myself to swallow before responding. Doubled. That's a pretty significant increase. Can I ask why? Mom jumped in her voice, taking on that soothing tone she used when explaining why something unfair was actually reasonable. Well, sweetie, utility costs have gone up and there's general inflation. Plus, we need to account for wear and tear on the house. It was a transparent lie. Nothing about our household expenses had changed, and my minimal presence in the house could hardly cause significant wear and tear. I looked toward Jack, who was suddenly very interested in the pattern on his dinner plate. Does this apply to Jack too? I asked, already knowing the answer. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table before Dad cleared his throat again. Actually, Jack is in a different situation right now. He's between jobs at the moment, and we're helping him out temporarily. I placed my silverware down carefully. Let me understand this. You're doubling my rent so you can continue supporting Jack not working. That's not how I would phrase it, Dad replied, an edge creeping into his voice. Jack lost his position at the warehouse through no fault of his own. The company downsized. This was news to me. I thought you quit the warehouse job because the manager was unreasonable. Jack finally looked up, shrugging with practiced nonchalance. It was complicated. They were cutting hours, and the environment was toxic. Mom reached over to pat Jack's hand. Your brother is actively looking for better opportunities, something with growth potential this time. I took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. So, while he's looking for this perfect opportunity with growth potential, you need me to subsidize his unemployment by paying double rent. We're not asking you to subsidize anything, Dad said sharply. We're asking you to pay fair market value for living here. You make good money as a physical therapist. $1,200 is still less than an apartment would cost. The unfairness of it all crashed over me like a wave. I had been paying my way, working 60-hour weeks, carefully budgeting every dollar, while Jack continued to receive endless support and excuses. I see, I said finally, my voice unnaturally calm despite the storm raging inside me. We knew you would understand, Mom said, relief evident in her voice. You've always been so responsible. Dinner continued with forced normalcy, but I barely tasted the food. Jack launched into a story about a potential podcast opportunity that sounded identical to 3 previous opportunities that had gone nowhere. My parents listened with rapt attention, oohing and aahing at appropriate intervals, the rent conversation apparently forgotten. But it wasn't forgotten for me. As I sat there nodding mechanically at Jack's grand plans, something crystallized in my mind. This would never end. The pattern established in childhood would continue indefinitely. I would always be expected to be responsible, while Jack received endless chances and support. That night, I called Aunt Susan, my voice breaking as I recounted the conversation. They want me to pay double so they can keep supporting Jack. How is that fair? Aunt Susan sighed heavily. It's not fair, Carlotta. It never has been. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do if I refuse? They'll just tell me to move out. Maybe that's not the worst idea, she said gently. You've been saving to move out anyway, right? Maybe this is the universe telling you it's time. After hanging up with Aunt Susan, I texted Marissa, who responded with appropriate outrage. That is complete BS. They're treating you like an ATM while letting your brother live consequence-free. You deserve better than this, Carl. Seriously. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom. The glow-in-the-dark stars I had placed there at age 8 still faintly illuminated the darkness. I had been a child who loved order and science, fascinated by the real constellations. I remembered begging my parents for the star kit for Christmas, only to receive a practical sweater instead. Jack, who had no interest in astronomy, received a telescope that gathered dust in the corner of his room. The memory solidified something in me. This pattern would never change unless I changed it. By morning, I knew what I needed to do, even as dread and determination battled within me. At breakfast, Mom asked cheerfully, "So, is the first of the month good for the new rent arrangement?" I nodded, buttering my toast with steady hands, despite my racing heart. "That works." As they smiled in satisfaction at my compliance, they had no idea what I was actually agreeing to. The moment I decided to leave was both terrifying and liberating. A lifetime of being the responsible, compliant daughter made the thought of such rebellion almost unthinkable. Yet here I was planning my escape like a prisoner studying guard rotations. My first call was to Marissa, who immediately shifted into problem-solving mode. "You can crash at my place while you look for something permanent," she offered without hesitation. "Thanks, but I need to do this right," I replied. "I need my own place, something I can afford long-term." We spent that evening scrolling through rental listings on my phone, huddled in the corner booth of a coffee shop far from my parents' neighborhood. Most apartments in the area started at $1,400 for a one-bedroom, which would strain my budget even more than the doubled rent. "What about roommates?" Marissa suggested. "Split the cost, get more space." The idea made sense. Through a workplace bulletin board, I discovered that Taylor, a radiologic technologist who occasionally worked with our rehabilitation patients, was looking for a roommate. Her current roommate was moving in with her boyfriend, leaving half of a reasonably priced two-bedroom apartment available. I arranged to meet Taylor for coffee, nervous about the prospect of living with someone I barely knew. She turned out to be warm, organized, and refreshingly straightforward. "I work odd hours sometimes, but I'm quiet coming and going," she explained. "I'm clean, but not obsessive, and I don't throw parties. My main requirements are paying bills on time and giving heads up about overnight guests." The apartment was a 15-minute drive from the rehabilitation center in a well-maintained building with secured entry. The rent would be $800 each plus utilities. It was more than I had been paying my parents initially, but significantly less than their new demand. "I need to move in within 2 weeks," I told Taylor. "Is that too soon?" She shook her head. "That's perfect, actually. Jen moves out this weekend, so the room is available whenever you're ready." With housing secured, I created a detailed exit strategy. I recalculated my budget, accounting for the increased housing costs and the need to purchase items my parents' house had provided. The math was tight, but doable, especially considering I'd been approved for a small raise during my recent performance review. The logistical challenge was moving my belongings without alerting my family. I began with small loads, things that wouldn't be immediately noticed missing. Each morning, I would place a few items in my car before leaving for work. During lunch breaks, I would drive to the new apartment and drop them off using the key Taylor had provided. My coworker Marcus caught me loading books into my trunk one afternoon. "Planning a donation?" he asked. Something in my expression must have revealed more than I intended, because his casual smile faded into concern. "Everything okay, Carlotta?" The genuine worry in his voice cracked something in me. I found myself explaining the situation in a rushed whisper, half expecting judgment. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "My older sister was always the golden child. Nothing I did was ever enough for my parents. I moved 6 states away after college and established firm boundaries. Best decision I ever made. His understanding was like a balm. I'm scared, I admitted. I've never defied them like this. You're not defying them, he corrected gently. You're choosing yourself. There's a difference. The next day, Amanda noticed my distraction during our team meeting. Carlotta, can you stay a moment? She asked as others filed out. Expecting criticism for my inattention, I was surprised when she closed her office door and asked directly, What's going on with you lately? You seem preoccupied. Something about her straightforward concern broke through my carefully maintained composure. The whole story tumbled out, including my secret moving plans. I'm sorry if it's affected my work, I concluded. Amanda shook her head. Your work remains excellent. I'm asking because I care about you. She paused, considering her next words carefully. You know, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is establish healthy boundaries. It might hurt them temporarily, but in the long run, it gives everyone the opportunity to build a more honest relationship. Her words stayed with me as I continued my clandestine moving operation. Each day brought new challenges. My mother nearly discovered a half-empty dresser drawer when she entered my room unannounced to leave clean laundry. I managed to distract her with a question about dinner plans before she could notice. Another close call came when my father asked why my bookshelf looked different. I casually mentioned reorganizing by color instead of author, which satisfied him despite being nowhere near the truth. The guilt was perhaps the hardest part. Despite years of unfair treatment, some deeply ingrained part of me still felt I was betraying my family. Each night, as I lay in my increasingly empty room, I questioned my decision. Was I overreacting? Should I just accept the rent increase and stay? Was I being selfish? These doubts would then be followed by memories of countless instances of favoritism culminating in the rent increase that would further enable Jack's dependency. In those moments, my resolve would strengthen again. By the end of the second week, I had moved approximately 80% of my belongings. What remained were daily essentials and larger items that would require an obvious moving effort. I had arranged for Marissa and Marcus to help with these final pieces on a Saturday, when my parents typically spent the day shopping and visiting my grandmother. The night before my final move, I joined my family for dinner as usual. Jack dominated the conversation with talk about a potential job at a friend's startup, which sounded as nebulous as his previous opportunities. My parents listened attentively, asking encouraging questions and offering advice. Not once did they ask how I was feeling or what was new in my life. As I helped clean up afterward, a strange calm settled over me. Tomorrow, everything would change. For better or worse, I was taking control of my narrative. In my nearly empty room that night, I wrote a letter explaining my departure. I rewrote it 7 times each version, oscillating between rage and sadness before I finally settled on simple honesty. Dear Mom and Dad, by the time you read this, I will have moved out. The decision to double my rent while continuing to financially support Jack was the final demonstration that you see us fundamentally differently. I need space to process this lifetime pattern and determine what kind of relationship we can have moving forward. I am safe and settled. Please don't try to change my mind. This decision wasn't made lightly or in anger, but with clear understanding of what I need to be healthy and happy. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. Carlotta. I sealed the envelope and placed it on my desk, then went to sleep in my childhood bedroom for the final time. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, my stomach tight with anticipation. Through my window, I watched my parents load tote bags into the car for their weekly shopping trip and visit to Grandma's. Jack was presumably still asleep as he rarely rose before noon on weekends. We'll be back around 4. Mom called up the stairs. Do you need anything from the store? No, I'm all set. I called back, the double meaning of my words not lost on me. Okay then, have a good day. The front door closed, followed by the sound of the car backing down the driveway. I counted to 100 before springing into action. I texted Marissa and Marcus. All clear, Operation Independence is a go. They arrived 15 minutes later in Marcus's pickup truck. Working efficiently, we loaded my bed frame mattress desk and the remaining boxes of clothes and personal items. The room that had been mine for most of my life was stripped bare in less than an hour. I stood in the doorway for a final look. Without my belongings, it resembled any generic guest room. Had my presence here been equally generic, equally replaceable? "You okay?" Marissa asked, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I nodded. "Just saying goodbye." Downstairs, I placed the letter propped against the fruit bowl in the center of the kitchen table where it couldn't be missed. My hand lingered on the envelope for a moment before I finally turned away. "Ready?" Marcus asked, keys in hand. "Ready." I confirmed, following them out and locking the door behind me with the key I would never use again. The drive to my new apartment felt surreal. I sat silently in the passenger seat of Marcus's truck, watching familiar neighborhoods give way to the area that would now be home. Behind us, Marissa followed in her car with the last of my smaller items. Taylor was waiting when we arrived, holding the lobby door open as we made multiple trips with furniture and boxes. By early afternoon, everything was in my new room, though mostly still packed. "Welcome home," Taylor said, offering me a glass of wine once Marcus and Marissa had departed. "To new beginnings." We clinked glasses, and I felt the first genuine smile in weeks spread across my face. To new beginnings. The peace was short-lived. At 3:30, my phone began vibrating continuously. My parents had returned home early and discovered my absence and the note. First came the texts. "What is this nonsense? Come home immediately." "Carlotta, this is extremely immature. Call us right now." "Where are you? We are worried sick." Then the calls started, first from Mom, then Dad, then Mom again. I silenced my phone but couldn't bring myself to turn it off completely. Some part of me needed to witness their reaction, needed confirmation that my absence mattered. Around 4:30, Jack called unexpectedly. "Curious," I answered. "Carl, what the hell?" His voice sounded genuinely shocked. "Mom and Dad are freaking out." "I left a note explaining everything," I replied calmly. "Yeah, I read it. But why didn't you say something to me?" The question surprised me. Would you have understood, or would you have sided with them like always? A pause. "I don't always side with them." "You benefit from their favoritism, Jack. You've never once acknowledged it or stood up for me." Another long pause. "Where are you staying? Are you safe?" "I have an apartment with a roommate. I'm fine." "They're talking about driving around looking for your car." I hadn't considered that possibility. "Tell them not to bother. I'm not coming back and I need space right now." "They're really upset, Carl." "I've been upset for years, Jack. They never noticed." After hanging up, I texted Amanda explaining that my parents might show up at work looking for me. She immediately responded, "Thanks for the heads up. I've got your back. Let me know if you need anything." The weekend passed in a blur of unpacking and ignoring increasingly frantic messages from my parents. By Monday morning, I had received 37 texts, 15 voicemails, and numerous missed calls. I sent one message to both of them. "I am safe. I need time. Please respect my space." Just as I had feared and expected, my parents appeared at Lakeside Rehabilitation Center around lunchtime on Monday. I was with a patient when the receptionist called to warn me. "Your parents are here demanding to see you. Amanda is talking to them now." I thanked her and quickly finished my session, then made my way to the lobby, stomach churning. Amanda stood like a sentinel between my parents and the treatment areas, her posture professional but unyielding. "Carlotta!" Mom cried upon seeing me rushing forward. "What is going on? Why would you do this?" Dad looked more angry than concerned. "This is completely unacceptable behavior. You've worried your mother sick." Amanda caught my eye with a questioning glance. I gave her a small nod indicating I could handle the situation. "Let's talk outside." I suggested, leading them to a small courtyard where patients sometimes did walking exercises. Once seated on a bench, Mom immediately launched into tearful recriminations. "How could you just disappear? We thought something terrible had happened until we found your note." I explained my reasons in the letter, I replied, working to keep my voice steady. "Doubling your rent is hardly reason to run away in the middle of the night," Dad countered. "If it was a financial hardship, you could have discussed it with us." "It wasn't about the money," I said. "It was about what the money represented. You've always treated Jack and me differently. The rent increase was just the final proof that nothing will ever change." "That's ridiculous," Dad scoffed. We've always treated you both fairly." The denial, so absolute and dismissive, ignited something in me. Really? When Jack needed car repairs, you paid without question. When I needed transmission work, I was told it was a normal adult expense I should handle myself. Jack has failed at every job he's ever had, and you've supported him financially through it all. I worked through college, got scholarships, built a career, and you doubled my rent to fund his continued unemployment. Mom flinched at my words. That's not what happened. We just needed to adjust your rent to a more appropriate amount. And the timing with Jack losing another job was just coincidence. Neither answered directly. Dad shifted tactics. Where are you living now? That apartment with Marissa? No, I have my own place with a different roommate. You can't afford that, he declared. Not with your student loans and other expenses. The assumption that he knew better than I did about my own finances was so typical, it almost made me laugh. Actually, I can. I've done the math very carefully. This is absurd, Dad said. Pack up whatever temporary arrangement you've made and come home. We can discuss adjusting the rent if that's really the issue. It's not about the rent, I repeated. It's about a lifetime of being held to different standards than Jack. It's about finally realizing that nothing I do will ever be enough to receive the same support and attention he gets automatically. Mom began crying in earnest. How can you say such hurtful things? We love you both equally. Loving equally doesn't mean treating equally, I said softly. And right now I need space to figure out what kind of relationship we can have going forward. So you're just cutting us off, Dad demanded. No, I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. The conversation continued in circles with my parents, alternating between anger hurt and attempts to make me feel guilty. Amanda checked on me twice, ostensibly delivering paperwork, but really making sure I was okay. Finally, when it became clear neither side was changing positions, I stood up. I need to get back to my patients. Please respect my decision. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk more. Walking away from my tearful mother and red-faced father was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But with each step back toward the building, I felt the fragile beginnings of something new and vital taking root inside me: self-respect. In the weeks following my departure, my parents cycled through every possible tactic to get me to return home. The initial anger gave way to financial bribes, emotional manipulation, and eventually desperate bargaining. "We'll reduce your rent back to $600, Dad offered in a voicemail 3 days after our confrontation at work. "We'll waive rent entirely for 3 months, came the offer a week later. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were willing to completely eliminate the rent they had insisted was fair market value, just to maintain their control over my life. The most surprising development came from Jack. 2 weeks after I moved out, he texted asking if we could meet for coffee. Curious and cautious, I agreed to see him at a cafe halfway between our homes. He arrived looking uncharacteristically disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. "You look terrible," I observed as he slid into the booth opposite me. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, well, the house isn't exactly peaceful these days." I waited, sipping my latte, unwilling to make this conversation easy for him. "Look," he finally said, staring into his black coffee. "I know I've been the favorite. I've always known." The admission, so simple and direct, stunned me into silence. "Mom and Dad made everything easier for me," he continued, "and I let them because, well, who wouldn't want an easier path? But seeing what happened with you, how they drove you away—" He shook his head. "It made me realize I'm not doing myself any favors by letting this continue." "What do you mean?" "I'm 25 with no real job history, no degree, and no direction. Meanwhile, you're out here supporting yourself, building a career, being an actual adult." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "I'm jealous of you, Carl. Always have been." I nearly choked on my coffee. Jealous of me? When you got everything handed to you? "I got stuff handed to me," he corrected. "You got strength, independence, real confidence, not the fake kind Mom and Dad tried to inflate in me." He sighed heavily. "I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. God knows I've had it easy. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what they did to both of us." Our conversation lasted nearly 3 hours, dissecting our childhood and the family dynamics that had shaped us so differently. For the first time, Jack seemed to be seeing our parents clearly, without the filter of preferential treatment. "I told them yesterday I'm moving out," he revealed as we were preparing to leave. Found a room in a house with some guys from the warehouse. I start back there next week, this time in inventory management. How did they take it? Not well, he admitted. Dad said I was being influenced by your rebellion. Mom cried. I felt a pang of sympathy for my parents despite everything. They're losing control of both of us at once. That can't be easy. Maybe it's what they need, Jack suggested. A chance to see us as actual adults, not just extensions of themselves. As news of my sudden departure spread through our extended family, people began taking sides. Aunt Susan was firmly in my corner, even hosting a small housewarming gathering at my new apartment, with a few cousins who supported my decision. I'm so proud of you, she whispered as she hugged me goodbye that evening. It takes courage to break unhealthy patterns. Others were less understanding. My grandmother called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. My father's brother sent a long email about family loyalty and ungrateful children. Their reactions only confirmed that the problem ran deeper than just my immediate family. It was embedded in our entire family culture. Meanwhile, I was adjusting to my new living situation. Taylor proved to be an ideal roommate, respectful of my space, but friendly and supportive. We established easy routines, occasionally cooking dinner together or watching movies on weekends, but also giving each other plenty of independence. My parents' attempts to contact me became more desperate as a full month passed. Then came the unannounced visit to my new apartment. I had deliberately not shared my address, but they had apparently followed me home one evening from work. Carlotta, please, Mom pleaded when I answered the door. Can we just talk? Against my better judgment, I invited them in, grateful that Taylor was working an evening shift. They sat awkwardly on my secondhand couch, looking out of place in the apartment I had quickly come to think of as home. Dad's eyes scanned the room, no doubt calculating the rent and judging my financial decisions. Mom kept wiping tears that seemed to flow on command. We miss you, she began. The house feels empty without you. Jack moved out too, I hear, I replied neutrally. Dad frowned. Yes, another impulsive decision we can thank you for inspiring. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that engaging with accusations wouldn't help. I think it's good that Jack is taking steps toward independence. He's not ready, Mom insisted, and neither were you. We were trying to help both of you in different ways. By charging me double to support him. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We may have handled that situation poorly. We're willing to admit that. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard yet, though still far from acknowledging the broader pattern. This isn't just about the rent, I explained for what felt like the 100th time. It's about a lifetime of different standards and expectations. We know you feel that way, Mom said carefully. But families aren't always perfectly equal in how they treat children. Different children have different needs. I suggested meeting on neutral ground the following weekend to continue the conversation, needing to end this unexpected visit before saying something I might regret. They reluctantly agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment. That meeting proved slightly more productive. Away from both our territories, we managed to have a calmer discussion. I brought specific examples of their differential treatment throughout our lives, which they initially dismissed but eventually began to consider. I never realized how those decisions looked from your perspective. Mom admitted when I reminded her of the missed high school graduation speech. We were just responding to the immediate needs at the time. Jack always seemed to have more immediate needs, I pointed out. Have you ever wondered why? That question led to a difficult but necessary conversation about how their lower expectations and constant bailouts had actually hurt Jack's development. For the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in my father's eyes. We may have been overprotective of him, he conceded reluctantly. And undersupportive of me, I added. The conversation ended with no firm resolutions, but a tentative agreement to try family therapy. My father initially balked at the suggestion, calling it unnecessary dramatics, but my mother surprised me by supporting the idea. If it helps heal our family, I'm willing to try, she said, touching Dad's arm gently. Aren't you? He grudgingly agreed, though his body language suggested deep skepticism. As I watched them leave the coffee shop that day, I felt the first tentative hope that real change might be possible. though I harbored no illusions that it would be quick or easy. Jack called that evening to report that our parents had informed him about the therapy plan. "Did you agree to go?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied. "I think I need it as much as they do, maybe more." His willingness to participate in his own growth confirmed the changes I had observed in our coffee shop meeting. Without our parents' safety net, Jack was finally beginning to mature in ways that had previously seemed impossible. 6 months after my abrupt departure from my parents' house, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. My tiny bedroom in the apartment I shared with Taylor had become a sanctuary of peace and self-determination. The walls, painted a soothing sage green, were decorated with art. I had chosen myself photos of friends who supported me, and inspirational quotes about courage and growth. At work, my confidence had blossomed, without the constant undercurrent of family tension draining my energy. Amanda had noticed the change, assigning me more complex cases and mentioning future leadership possibilities. "You've really come into your own these past few months," she remarked during my performance review. "There's a clarity and focus to your work that's impressive." The review came with another raise smaller than the first, but significant in what it represented recognition of my value and contribution. I was building a reputation as a physical therapist who could handle challenging cases with both technical skill and genuine compassion. My social life had expanded too. Taylor had introduced me to her friend group, a diverse collection of healthcare workers, teachers, and creative professionals who gathered regularly for game nights and local events. Among them was Daniel, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a quick wit, who had recently asked me to dinner. The possibility of romance, something I had put aside during the family turmoil, now seemed like an exciting prospect rather than another complication. Most surprisingly, my relationship with Jack had evolved into something resembling actual siblinghood. We met for coffee or lunch every couple of weeks, sometimes just catching up, other times diving into deeper conversations about our shared childhood and its lasting effects. Jack had stuck with his warehouse job, receiving a small promotion after 3 months of consistent performance. He had also enrolled in evening classes at the community college, determined to finish the degree he had abandoned years earlier. "It's harder than I remembered," he admitted during one of our lunches, "actually having to work for grades instead of charming my way through classes." "But more satisfying," I suggested. He nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, weirdly enough. When I earn a good grade now, it actually means something." My parents' journey had been more complicated. The family therapy sessions, which we had been attending bi-weekly, were often tense and difficult. Dad particularly struggled with acknowledging the favoritism that had been so obvious to everyone else. "We just parented differently based on your personalities," he insisted during an early session. "Jack needed more guidance and support." "Or did he seem to need more because you never required him to handle anything himself?" our therapist, Dr. Rivera, gently challenged. These sessions frequently ended with one or both of my parents defensive or upset, but slowly incrementally progress emerged. Mom was the first to have a breakthrough, tearfully acknowledging during our fifth session that she had indeed treated us differently. "I think I saw myself in Carlotta," she admitted. "Independent, capable, driven. I thought she didn't need me the way Jack did. I told myself I was being fair by giving more to Jack, but really I was shortchanging Carlotta because I assumed she would be fine regardless." That acknowledgement opened the door to more honest conversations about the impact of their parenting choices on both of us. Dad remained more resistant, but even he eventually began to recognize patterns in his behavior. The first holiday after my move out had been Thanksgiving, which created predictable family drama. My parents had assumed I would return home for the traditional family gathering, despite our ongoing conflicts. When I declined, suggesting we weren't ready for that level of togetherness, the familiar guilt tactics emerged. "Your grandmother will be heartbroken," Mom had pleaded. "It might be her last Thanksgiving." Grandmother had made a miraculous recovery once I stood firm, and was still going strong 6 months later. Instead of the traditional family gathering, I had joined Aunt Susan, who hosted an alternative Thanksgiving for family members who needed a break from the usual dynamics. Jack had surprised everyone by joining us rather than attending our parents' event, a decision that marked a significant shift in his willingness to establish his own boundaries. By the time Christmas approached, enough healing had occurred that I agreed to attend a scaled-down family dinner at my parents' house. The event was awkward but civil, with moments of genuine warmth breaking through the lingering tension. My mother had pulled me aside as I was preparing to leave. "I miss having you here," she said softly, "but I'm proud of the independent life you're building. I should have told you that more often growing up." Now, with spring turning to summer, our family dynamics continued to evolve. My parents had finally sold their large house, downsizing to a condo that better suited their needs as empty nesters. The move seemed symbolic of the larger shift in their perspective, an acknowledgement that the family structure had permanently changed. During a recent therapy session, Dr. Rivera had asked each of us to share what we had learned through this process. "I've learned that fairness doesn't mean sameness," Mom offered, "but it does mean giving each child what they actually need, not what's easiest for the parents. I've learned that helping isn't always helpful." Dad said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Sometimes it's just controlling in disguise." Jack's response had been particularly insightful. "I've learned that being the favorite child isn't actually a favor, it's a handicap." When my turn came, I thought carefully before answering. "I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Not just for your own well-being, but sometimes for the health of the entire family system." Dr. Rivera had nodded approvingly. "That's an important insight, Carlotta. Systems resist change, but sometimes a single courageous action can shift the entire dynamic." My relationship with my parents remained a work in progress. There were still difficult moments, old patterns that reemerged during stress comments that stung with their familiar dismissiveness. But there was also a new foundation of honesty and mutual respect that we were carefully building together. Aunt Susan had observed this change during our most recent lunch date. "I see your parents really listening to you now in a way they never did before. You created that shift by valuing yourself enough to walk away." I had once believed that family relationships were fixed, that the roles assigned in childhood were permanent. My journey over these past months had taught me otherwise. Family dynamics could change, but only when someone was brave enough to disrupt the established patterns. By refusing to accept unfair treatment, by valuing myself enough to walk away, I had created the possibility of a healthier relationship, not just for myself, but for our entire family. Jack was discovering his own capabilities. My parents were confronting their biases, and I was learning to trust my own worth independent of their validation. The journey hadn't been easy, and it was far from complete. But standing on my own terms, I finally felt free to love my family without being diminished by them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to love yourself first. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who played favorites? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that you deserve to be valued equally in all your relationships.